Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friends Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm beaming with delight because I finally get to start a Daily Friends Show with a positive news story. But before we get into that, today I'm joined by Mlondi and Mdluli. Mlondi, how are you doing? Oh, I think he's having internet problems.
Hi, Nick. I'm good, and you? I'm very good, Nick.
All right,
yes,
Mlondi was lagging
good,
a little
Nick.
bit there.
And how are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad.
Yes,
and we're also joined by Sara Gon.
Hi. Yeah, a bit of sun peeking out there. So who knows? Yeah.
It's the light at the end of the tunnel. Right. So let's get onto that good news story.
It isn't a train.
Yeah, hopefully it's not a train.
It's not a train.
In this case, we have some news which actually came out yesterday, and we didn't discuss on the show because it was still a little bit unclear what was going on. But the mayor of Tshwane, Randall Williams, has resigned. So yesterday, Mayor Randall Williams put out this notice that he was resigning from the Tshwane government. He said that he wasn't bitter at all about this and that he was doing it for the sake of the stability of the coalition, which is kind of a little bit mysterious because this thing came out in the morning and then was a little bit unclear as to what exactly was going on. But anyway, the multi-party coalition Tshwane, which is composed of the DA, Action SA, Freedom Front Plus, and Carter Freedom Party, ACDP, and COPE, met together, and apparently the reason for the resignation, and it seems as though he was under pressure from all the political parties involved, was the disastrous Auditor General's results, findings which showed that Tshwane had some serious issues with its financial management that needed to be rectified. In a statement released this morning, the six-party coalition said it will now shift its focus towards electing a new mayor, and that it needed to differentiate itself from the ANC by not defending the indefensible. There needed to be consequences for the damning AG report, the coalition said, which highlighted a severe lack of financial controls and oversight in the municipality. So Tshwane, let me remind all of our listeners, is the one municipality in Gauteng, apart from Midvaal, on which the non-ANC bloc controls a majority safely without needing to recruit either the EFF or the Patriotic Alliance. And as a result, this has been perhaps the best chance they have for stable government in all of the Gauteng metros. And so I think it was really disastrous for them when they had this negative Auditor General report, because this is the one city where the coalition is supposed to be stable and be able to do proper governance stuff to show that it can be different from the ANC. So having this bad result was really bad. But the reason I'm so happy is because someone stepped down when something went wrong. Mlondi, I don't know if you can hear me clearly, but are you as happy about this as I am?
Yes, Nick. I'm very happy, hey, because it's rare that we see something like this, hey. Like we don't see something like this quite often. So it's good that that it is happening. When someone sees that they haven't done well in a position, they step down. So I guess it should be commended, and yeah, it's good.
Yeah, this is just so positive for our political culture. If more people resigned, Sara, wouldn't it just be wonderful?
Well, you see, it's like a little glimmer of a sort of Western-style democracy, that although he probably wasn't responsible directly for what his subordinate did wrong, he was the person in charge. He was the overseer. He was the manager. Big thing went wrong, and he's fallen on his sword, or he might have been stabbed to death. But either way, he's out, and it appears to be for that reason. And that's a very, very good thing, because it's about saying, if you go into a position of leadership, you have to be held accountable, and you have to be accountable. And so while it's a glitch from the point of view of the actual running of, to some extent, to the running of Pretoria and seeming good health, if I were the ANC or the EFF or the PA or whoever on the other side, I would be a little bit sort of miffed that he did the right thing, because this is the right thing. And they this isn't in their lexicon of right things. So in a way, it is a victory for the coalition.
Yes, but so I mean, this is kind of, I guess, how low the bar has fallen, right? Is that we get a resignation from a politician, and this is cause for celebration, but it is because it connected results which were not good to resignation, which is the appropriate response. And the more of that we see in our politics, the better our results are going to be. Now, of course, this is only step 2. Step 1 was the Auditor General finding. Step 2 is the resignation. And now step 3 is the coalition actually needs to fix the problems that are in Tshwane. And that is, of course, the much more difficult thing to do. But still, I wonder who they will choose as their new mayor. I don't know if, Sara, you have any thoughts on that.
No, I actually don't know the personalities well enough. Pretoria's generally done quite well since the coalition with regard to mayors, and you haven't had the sort of Sturm and Drang that's accompanied Johannesburg or Ekurhuleni, and sort of some strange characters leaping out of the woodwork and insisting that they have the God-given right to rule. So I'm not entirely sure. But again, if they choose somebody who's solid and capable of doing the job, that'll be sort of the fourth element of the of doing it properly, and that is replacing Williams with someone who can fit the requirements for that position.
And this remains, I think, the most important test for the opposition in the country is Tshwane. They need to make sure, particularly if they're going to win in Gauteng come 2024, and if they're going to make a play for national, they need to get Tshwane right. And so far, personally, I don't live there, but from what I've heard, it doesn't seem like it's going that well. So they need to work as hard as they can to turn that around. Okay, speaking of coalitions and breakaways and shenanigans going on in municipalities, as we've recently covered on the show, the EFF has recently decided that it is going into bed with the ANC in municipalities across the country, and there seems to be a sort of general order, and that has involved throwing out the mostly DA-led governments in Gauteng, and instead supporting ANC candidates and sort of minnow party candidates for mayor, which is what happened in Johannesburg. But it also meant breaking out of any kind of coalition agreement with the IFP in KZN. Now, there are a couple of municipalities where the IFP controls it in cooperation with the EFF, who in fact in some places have deputy mayor positions. Well, after the EFF made its decision to divorce the IFP and go into coalition with the ANC wherever they can, there is apparently some discontentment within the EFF, which is not something you often hear about because the EFF is this extremely centralized organization. But there are some EFF councillors who've been speaking to the Herald newspaper who say they are considering joining a breakaway party from the EFF called the AEF, or the African Economic Freedom Party. These councillors say that they are very unhappy with the decision to break the coalition with the IFP and that they're not too comfortable into getting into bed with the ANC. One of them who spoke to the Herald said, quote, "The fact of the matter is that national leadership's decision has put us in a difficult position. A few months ago, we were going around the province telling people to dump the ANC because of rotten and corrupt political party. Now we are being told to go back to the very same people and tell them to support the ANC. It makes us come across as dishonest and unprincipled people." Mlondi, the disgruntled EFF councillors sound surprised that the party was unprincipled. Should they have been?
The answer is no, and I'll explain why. The EFF is known, for not having any principles. So, I mean, it was given that that the coalition was going to go wrong somehow, somehow, because we've seen already since 2016 when the DA did a coalition with the EFF that the EFF can't be trusted. So the EFF is on brand; they can't be trusted, and they're showing us why they, like they keep, like they what's this? They keep us,
They're shifting
us. Yes, like they keep on showing us day and day like why they shouldn't be trusted. So it's very on brand of them to do.
Yeah, Sara, this is an interesting microcosm here because we're now seeing the first test of the coalition of doom, the ANC EFF coalition, which is of course very possible outcome of the 2024 election. And it seems as though, firstly, it's very difficult to reconcile the EFF's ideological similarity to the ANC with its extreme opposition to the ANC. I'm sure there are people who join the EFF. I mean, I've encountered people back when I was a politician who were saying to me, they said, no, I'm voting for the EFF because they are the ones who are taking the fight to Zuma. They are the ones who are actually standing up in Parliament and telling him to pay back the money. They're the strongest anti-ANC voice. And it's a little bit awkward for them to now suddenly go, oh, well, I mean, we're going to coalition with them. We'll, I don't know, we'll keep them honest or something. I guess that's the pitch to the EFF's voters, but it's not a very convincing one. What are your thoughts on what this says?
See, I mean, who knows what's going on in the heads of the Central Committee or the whatever Stalinist appellation you want to attach to it. But I assume they initially went into opposition with the ANC to show the ANC that they were in opposition and they were going to give them a run for their money. On the basis that no one could be less principled than the ANC, which is probably about correct. It seems like there's literally a strategic decision's been made to go over to the ANC. I don't know whether it's because the EFF has decided that it is now shown its muscle sufficiently that by going in with the ANC will be very thankful to have them and they can lead on and thus take over the country. I'm not sure that they were quite soon enough for it, but it also coincides with the fact that the EFF is more and more in these current range of coalitions, sort of starting to get positions where it actually has to be held accountable for something. And perhaps it's decided, I don't know, I mean, it really doesn't know, but perhaps it's been decided that, by going in, I can't imagine what the thought process is for going into the ANC at this particular position. But it does sort of say to the ANC, well, we are your kingmakers. We can make the difference. If we swap sides, you can be, you're secure. Except I think the EFF has probably not taken account of the one thing at leadership level, has not taken account of the one thing that you've mentioned, and I know that Gabriel's mentioned on occasion, and that is that the EFF supporter, so probably this would go for a lot of the people going into local government for the first time, are not as venal, and they actually genuinely want to do something.
They're not nearly as ideological.
They're not nearly as ideological. It's practical. They want to see things improved, and so they're told to go in with the IFP, and they do, and then they probably get on a bit with the IFP, and things get done, and relationships and agreements as to who will take what, and then all of a sudden they must, do a volte-face and do what the Central Command wants them to do for reasons that either don't make sense to them or for which they are not apprised. And I wonder whether I think it's twofold. I think it's one is the strangeness of the EFF decision making, which, as I say, I can't say with any certainty, is the one thing, and the other thing is being as centralized and arrogant as the decision makers are. It's probably being felt their tendency to be patronized and bullied by the center, and that is not what they expected of their leaders, who wanted to take them into glories of socialism and equality, and
exactly.
And if there is likely to be a breakaway, I don't know how much of a breakaway it'll be, but I think I agree with one of the comments that any breakaway is a good breakaway from the EFF. Anything that puts the EFF under pressure and dents its popularity, I think is only good for our electoral.
It's quite fascinating to watch. Also, I suspect in some of these cases, some of the disgruntlement amongst the EFF is complaints that, well, we kind of actually like getting that deputy mayor's salary. And now suddenly having the rug pulled from underneath you. But Mlondi, there seems to be this issue where the EFF has this really centralized structure, right? It's like all Malema is the font of all decision, and everything sort of flows from there. But don't you agree that there's a bit of a problem with that, which is that there's no room then for any other leaders in the EFF? There can only be one king of the hill, and so if you're an ambitious person, you might not want to be in the EFF for too long, lest your head be cut off for challenging the dragon, the lord of the EFF. Do you agree?
Yes, Nick, I do agree. Well, if you know that the EFF sort of like a dictatorship. So like the party was started by Malema to try and get back at the ANC. So I mean, it's his baby. So he wouldn't actually allow anyone else to try to have an impact and to try and express their views. So yes, so like it's either his way or the highway. So yeah, so it's more like a dictatorship there.
Right, and it has its advantages, which is that you can change strategy and do everything pretty quickly. You can get people to resign from positions, but it also has negatives, which is that you're really going to limit the talent pool in your party, I suspect.
True.
All right, let us go on to the next story, focusing still on coalition shenanigans and chaos in the council. Ekurhuleni, we've been following this for a while. The coalition, the anti-ANC coalition, it looks like it's about to fall apart. I think Action SA has already left the coalition party, although even with Action SA, it didn't have a majority, so there was, doesn't make that much of a difference. And we're now just waiting for the moment in which I think Tanya Campbell, the DA mayor, is going to be voted out by an ANC EFF coalition, which previously voted her out, but then voted her back in because they couldn't agree on a candidate to replace her with, which is one of the more amusing things that's happened in our politics. But adding to that, so recently the coalition appointed Speaker of the Council was kicked out by a vote. However, it's a little bit complicated because apparently the Speaker walked out of Council after something was going on, and the city manager, who is not a politician but a bureaucrat and is only supposed to fill the Speaker's role in between elections or when a Speaker has been knocked out, as a very temporary role, seemed to decide that actually it was his time now to claim the throne because it was vacant because the coalition Speaker had walked out. And he said, "Oh, I'm the Speaker now, and we're going to hold this election for Speaker. And oh, look, we've elected the ANC EFF coalition Speaker candidate." The DA was rather upset about this, as were I think all the coalition parties, because this is quite honestly a very big breach of the rules. And so they took it to court. Now, there's an argument to be said that, maybe they shouldn't have bothered because it's the EFF and the ANC, together with some of their partners, do have enough votes to win in the council. And yet, there's another argument which says that when the rules get broken like this, it can't be left unchallenged. You need to follow things through. And so they went ahead and challenged it in court, and the court found that it was completely unreasonable for what the city manager did, and that the coalition Speaker was once again reappointed. Raymond Dlamini is his name. Mlondi, what the hell is going on here?
Well, Nick, it's pure madness, really. I mean, the fact that the city manager just took this, he just took up the seats to be the Speaker after the DA Speaker left. It's pure madness. I've never witnessed this my whole life. So, I mean, yeah, it's just pure madness, Nick, like absolute pure madness. But yes, I'm glad that the court found that that shouldn't have been done. And yeah, so I'm glad. It shows that we still have a good legal system in place.
What's interesting, though, is that so as far as I understand, the city manager was actually appointed or supported by the coalition. Yes. He may have been there previously, but the coalition actually endorsed his continuing until this betrayal. And in fact, they were so angry at what the city manager had done that they wanted the court to have a personal costs order against the city manager. But the court didn't agree with that and said, no, the municipality will pay the city manager's legal bill here. Sara, what do you make of all this?
I think they had to go to court and challenge the breach of the rules. Because it shows that rules have been breached and there are consequences. And I think it's important for the coalitions, particularly in the sort of teething phase of largely behaving like complete and utter idiots, and that while they may enjoy playing their power games, it's no fun for the people that they're supposed to serve. So although it may look a bit petty and to and fro, you got to look at the end of the day, who's taken things to court, why have they taken them, and why have they been successful? And I think it's part of that process. I think it's rather it happen now than and the parties get clear as to who they can go into coalition with at national level and who they can't, and how they've got to structure their coalition agreements, and that they do have to be coalition agreements. It's also about, I think I get the impression with a lot of things, both in Joburg and in Ekurhuleni, and this is what makes Pretoria, but different, is I think you've got far too many people in positions who don't actually know what the scope or limits of their authority actually are. And this is, if we have to go through part of this as a process for them to find out the hard way, that you don't just sit there and say, well, I've been bribed by the ANC and the EFF coalition to come in and whatever happened. Don't say that happened, but that sort of thing. It's a bit, it's messy and it's ugly, and in some respects it's downright embarrassing. But it is, as I say, probably now's as good a time to deal with it as any, so that you iron out a lot of these issues, so that you know that come next year, if you're going to enter an agreement as a coalition, in case you win, you cannot have X party, Y party, Z party, and if they enter into agreement, or if they say no, they're prepared to enter into the agreement, that agreement has got to be seriously binding for a serious piece of a period of time. So I think that's, much as we, it's very annoying. I think it starts to send a few messages and bed down who's capable of being part of a meaningful coalition and who isn't. And I think it'll help make things look different at the next year. And also the fact that you've sort of played at municipal level to see what you should be doing at national level. So it's probably not actually a bad thing, even though, you get the feeling you want to take a whole lot of people and just get one hell of a hiding on the collective club.
So there is this one other thing I want to talk about here, which is state capture, but the original meaning of the term. So I think when the term first got used in our politics, it was by Helen Ziller, who was saying that the ANC, through the policy of National Democratic Revolution and using tools like BEE and cadre deployment, had basically captured large amounts of what is supposed to be neutral state apparatus and made them loyal to the party. And I think that the term then got turned into meaning capture of the state by the Guptas, which is actually, I think, a less accurate term. But anyway, I think this is a good example of what the kind of state capture does. Here's what is supposed to be a neutral civil servant, and he gets essentially involved in the political process and seems to make a partisan decision. And it's just really bad for the whole democratic system. And I think that a lot of the anti-ANC coalition would be quite naive in the Gauteng metros about just how untrustworthy lots of the civil service is, and that it is still very much a civil service which wants to be with the ANC and has not much time for any other political party, and is willing to mess with the proper functioning of the council or of the municipality in order to get that done. And the sooner they learn that lesson, the better, because if they don't learn that lesson, they are not going to make many strides in governance at all, in my opinion.
If I can just say, I'm actually looking at doing research into, say the opposition coalition actually becomes government in next year. Day 2 after the election, what do they do about the civil service? And those issues become very, very pertinent, both the experience of it and how they've got to manage those people who, ideally you want, like you used to have and don't so much have anymore, civil service, independent or neutral civil services of the UK and America. None of that doesn't tend to pertain anymore. But obviously there are a variety of factors that we'll be looking at. And of course, there's a factor that has nothing to do with what I may research or you may think, and that is the fact that although you've got essentially an ANC civil service, you've also got people who, if they lose their jobs because they don't obey their new masters, they may never be employed again, and certainly not at those sort of salaries.
Right. So I don't think this is anything like an unsolvable problem.
But it's got to be considered. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And now's a good time to have some of those experiences, because of course, as you will well know, I mean, governance, being in politics at any level, there are rules and regulations and practices and things up to your wazoo. So you have to become familiar with that. And I would imagine quite a lot of people just don't have anywhere near the necessary knowledge of it, of these sort of things.
Definitely. All right. Sorry, you were interested in talking about this story. So we recently heard some fairly shocking news, which is that the post office is looking at retrenching 6,000 workers. the South African Post Office has not been having a good time recently. It has been going through financial issues and management problems, and it doesn't deliver things on time often. And some bits of it work sometimes, but a lot of it doesn't work at other times, and some things go missing. And it's very much a mixed bag experience for anyone who's had to use the post office. I ordered something from overseas a while ago, and it ended up coming not through a courier but through the post office, and it should have taken 1 month, and I think it took 4, but it did get here. So that's something. Anyway, but it looks like that some people have been laid off now from the post office. And this is, I think, quite a shock to mostly anyone who has watched the post office up till now. But it's very much upset the EFF, who said that they are opposed to, quote, what they called a jobs bloodbath as a solution for rescuing state-owned entities.
Well, it's just a bit of a bloodbath because it's nearly 40% of the post office's workforce. So that's significant. It's also, talk about coming late to the party, but the failing entity that is the South African Post Office has discovered what SOEs generally don't discover, but that the private sector knows well. And that is, if you are losing money or you need to restructure to stay competitive, sometimes it involves fewer or less retrenchments. And I think what's just happened is that the post office is discovering that it's going to actually have to retrench 6,000 people, a reasonable amount. I think it's 38%, which means it must be absolutely desperate. It must be in a desperate state. And I think we all know it's in a desperate state. And one of the reasons given for its desperate state, other than the usual sort of corruption, mismanagement, poor performance, incapacity, etc., which has always bugged the post office, and management has always been an opaque group of people that no one knows anything about, which is not a good sign, is the fact that technologically it just has not kept up with changing demands. Its payment of grants is failing. I don't know exactly how the sorting of letters and stuff goes, but it's also, will have been hit by the fact that so much in the way of certainly letter writing is done online and through other social media and things, that you're really dealing with far fewer letters and perhaps only parcels and big delivery items. And as the post office sort of sinks into the inability to do much at all, most of us will go the courier route because we're using the private sector to do it. So I think this is a sign of just how bad things are, and I would imagine it's so bad that the post office is actually this close to, if not either closing down completely or shrinking to such a narrow set of jobs and job requirements that 40% of its workforce has to be ditched. They just can't do anything with them anymore. And judging by some of the post office people I've dealt with, that would be no bad thing. But it's a realization that it's not some sort of socialist largesse that you keep people employed. Jobs are, to my mind, having a job is a privilege. It's not a right. You've got to fight for a job. You can't just let it sit there because government is paying ad infinitum because tax is rolling in. So basically, chickens are coming home to roost, but they're not coming through the post office because they couldn't deliver them.
Mlondi, I don't know if you have anything to add very briefly at the end here. It seems as though, as much as there is ideological resistance to, things like layoffs from state-owned enterprises, that there does come a point when the finances ring the bell and you have no other option.
Yes, Nick, that's true. I mean, it's sad that that jobs are being laid off, but like the post office is in a dire state, and like the jobs people do need to be laid off. So it's a sad situation, but it needs to happen. It's just not. It's just not. It's just not financially viable to continue with a large employee base. There's no funds available.
No, exactly.
Can I just make a point directly related to that? And that is this, and here's the lesson for government. The sooner you start to deal with the problems, the fewer people you'll have to lay off. If you reach a point where you're laying off 40% of your workforce, things have just collapsed pretty much.
No, exactly. And also, this wouldn't be such a tragedy for those people who are being laid off if the economy was healthier and if they could get a job somewhere else.
Because they've got some skills.
Exactly. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. We thank you very much for listening. We will be back tomorrow on the Daily Friend Show, and we hope you all have a wonderful day. Cheers, everyone.